Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Village Chats. This is our fourth episode, and we are so glad you're here. My name is Agnes Olo, and this is Journey Village Church Kikuyu. We are a church that exists to invite people to live the way of Christ. Joining me today is
Once again, Nashwaru Guru.
Nashwaru Guru and Clara Njeru, who's back from the other week. We get to have these conversations. So today we have started a new series. We closed our conversation on hope, and now we are moving into yet another big one for, I guess, for the community of Christ, compassion. And today in our reading, and I guess this has been said of Jesus a lot, that he had compassion for people as he moved around doing his business. He had compassion for people, and in this one story he had compassion for this one man. So I want us to start from there for you guys, as you have lived your lives, as you have experienced the different heartbreaks that life has thrown your way. What have you come to understand compassion as? What does it mean to live a life out of compassion? Yeah.
Oh, we are going to say ladies first.
Oh, okay.
Best excuse ever.
Cool. Sawa. Miss Clara.
Oh my gosh. Okay,
Clara.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Miss Agi. So, the thing that came to mind when you know what compassion means is extreme compassion, and that's how I've defined compassion for a long time in my life. It's where I grew up, there was always enough. And we're being told these places where there's no food. So my heart was like, oh, there's no food there for those people. It was always like extreme things, like lack of basic needs, lack of housing. So street children and children who don't have parents, like it would always be these extreme things, and never meeting people around me where they are, or closing the gap and seeing the other person more than, if a person has food, shelter and clothing, then why should I be compassionate? in that sense, but now I think growing and seeing, opening my eyes more. I remember someone who I work with a lot this week. We were making a video about Mother's Day, and I just thought, oh my gosh, she lost her mom, and for me it was like, how does she feel about being the one creating this video? And that's what compassion is for me now. It's not only extreme things, it's also trying, and I'm saying trying because it's not always does not always happen, but it's trying to be alert to the people around me and how I can meet them where they are. I can close that gap through compassion. Yes.
So it's really, for you, it's about waking up to what's happening here. So you start to be compassionate now, not the day that we decide we are going to the children's home.
Yes.
Like,
Oh
because
my
it seems like there's this modern compassion for, today, okay, let me garner up all the compassion I have.
Yeah.
It's gonna be used here. So thank you for sharing that. Just being awake. How do we now? We start to be awake to the people who are right here, right now, and trying to, close the gap between us and them. Nash.
I was just trying to wrestle with how I got to understand the way I understand compassion, which for me, I think predominantly compassion for me is being with. I either because of my vocation or choice, or because of just who I am as a person, I've never been very good at like fixing things. So I'm not the guy you call when your car breaks down, or one of the many things. And I've never had, I guess, enough material resources to be able, to like solve someone's problem. And I guess that to some degree has shaped my understanding of compassion to be lending a listening ear, offering a different perspective. But at the heart of it for me has to do with being with. But I think also that comes from me as a person who, which is funny, who responds very negatively to like outright advice and outright fixing my whatever problem is. It's almost like the easiest way to make sure that I don't do what you do is like to offer up me some advice. So because of sort of those things, I don't know, for me, I'm looking for my the way I experience compassion is when someone is capable of just being with me in my situation and even talking about it without having to come up with a conclusive, like, and now you should do ABCD. uh, and I think for me, I guess, which is funny because I'm a pastor, almost it comes with the territory to be a dispenser of advice. But I guess I try very hard to just be more present than anything else. And just to be able to say, you know what, the best gift I can do is just to be present with, which I think is quite underrated in our society, to
It
be
is.
with. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is. But you've also mentioned something that I think is important to highlight is also that it's easy almost in your space to be the person who gives compassion
Oh, yeah.
as compared to being the person who receives compassion. Whilst compassion is this thing that everyone needs because suffering, as it turns out, is part of the human condition.
Yeah.
There's so much suffering and we all go through it. Yeah, so I don't know about you, Clara. Like, is it easy for you? Like, do you receive compassion easily as you would think that you give it, or how does that work for you?
My gosh. And Nash was saying, it's like, is he describing compassion by like how he receives? How cool is that, honestly?
Yeah.
Because it's, gosh, can I refer to the Enneagram and just say that I'm a number 2, which is so hard for me then to,
Then number 2 with
yeah,
the
is a
Enneagram is someone
helper.
who is more
Yeah.
You're
inclined
right.
to
Like
help.
inclined to help, inclined to see, and I now like look at that more positively. It's like I'm more inclined to see need, or to offer compassion, which is not a bad thing ideally, but then it also is harder for me to know when I need compassion. And yes, there are times when I've received compassion, especially I'd say from my family, honestly, like being listened to and someone insisting even when I'm just like, no, it's fine, it's fine. It's like, no, what do you mean? What's going on? And from friends who dig, because then I can be very evasive of describing situations as they are. But then when someone takes time to dig in, like what actually is going on, and I'm able to then which is so uncomfortable there, but then speak what's actually going on, that I'm not okay, is I receive compassion. It's not easy,
Yeah.
but I say receive it by being hard. I think
By being
that's,
hard. Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing that. But today we are from the conversation on Sunday, we are focusing on compassion by having the courage to see where suffering is, to see where the pain is, to see um and Nash shared something that since he shared it with me has been in my mind, because I think it's so impactful when you think about it. It's what you see affects how you feel, and it then affects how you act. And if compassion is to be this active moving into a world that's broken and in pain and trying to bring healing, then it means our actions are very, like, our capacity to have compassion or to live out of compassion is very affected by what we see, because then what we see affects how we act. And so I wanted us to talk a bit about that, and I wanted you to start by sharing maybe why is seeing this very important aspects of us as human beings, why is seeing the thing, why is it where we start?
Oh, I was wondering when you're going to give me a chance to unleash my wisdom.
Yes, please.
Let's do this. So, starting from the top. I don't know. I just think that part of why it's important to, especially the what and how we see matters a lot is even just the way, like, even just like the little bit of how you frame that, because I think, like, it doesn't start by sort of seeing suffering as much as starts by seeing the sacredness and the preciousness of the people. I think when I start by seeing sort of suffering, then I'm mostly moved, I guess, to be sympathetic or to be have this messiah complex. If only I could fix you, then whatever. But if I could, like, sort of zoom out, and I think for me that's what the thing that was getting to me this week is, what if I saw, like, that drunk man in my neighborhood, and not start with his drunkenness, but start with, he is still an image bearer of God. and I guess therefore then, I mean, obviously, I wish I could say that that will come like the first thing, but but then that will come out of doing the hard work to say, I am choosing to see beyond his drunkenness, to see what presents as the suffering, but to focus on this is a person who is a child of God as much as I am, and therefore someone deserving of the same joy and peace and opportunities and provision and care and compassion that I have in that sense. I just think that when we start by seeing the suffering, even when we are moved, we can just end up actually doing more harm than good, because it's so moved to like, I have defined what suffering is for you, and as compared to, I'm going to start with like your sacredness. And just a bit of a story, because Clara is by far my greatest example of a compassionate person, and she has these children who are picked from the streets and ended up in this particular home. And I remember many years ago when she started visiting that place in Kashi, I was like, okay, good job, Aunt Clara, the helper, one more thing to help. But more important, she was faithful in just going and meeting up with those boys through the tough and the lows and the ups. I still remember a lot of the conversations we had didn't revolve around how much the kids were in suffering or in this, as much as how much she like longed for wholeness for these kids. And I think that this year that they were able to do some KCP exam, and some of them came out doing quite well. But I don't think that came with Clara constantly seeing them as people in suffering who need fixing. But it's like this orienting of like, you are worthy of love and care and opportunities, and because of that, then I am going to do everything I can to move, sort of participate in the redemption of sort of your suffering. That sounds like such a long-winded answer to but that is my wisdom.
But seeing, no, I think you've brought in, like, yes, it really is wisdom. I guess that's why we have you here. Thank you.
That is my height here to count for anything.
But I think, I mean, yes. So you see, but you're not starting from, oh, but like these people are really suffering. Where you're starting from is that these people are people, and they hold, or they have this inherent dignity within them. Yes, I was not ready for this, clearly, but thank you for sharing that. I think that's a very big reframe for a lot of even the compassion work that we get to do. It's where you start from is very important. What you start by seeing is very important. And today we talked a lot about like the fact that we are the screen generation, and we live on our phones and on our laptops and on our televisions and whatever. And so I wanted to ask you, Clara, to talk about that world, because if we are living on our screens, that means there's a lot going on there that we are seeing. There's a lot that we are seeing, and how then do we get to be I mean, you could talk about a bit about what that world is. I mean, as someone who is a professional in that world, and then how do we get to be intentional and faithful even with what we are seeing out in the social media world?
So screen generation, because before there was TV, which has been there for years.
Yes.
Which was so cool. I mean, but then Robel, who's a guy who speaks a lot,
A cool guy.
Anyway, I remember a few years ago him saying how, before news was curated, like people would spend hours curating what would then be shown on TV in the evening. But now everybody is a newsmaker. Oh my gosh. Like, literally, you open your WhatsApp right now, there's new information that someone has generated, and there's someone who's edited, everybody has something to say. And because of the global pandemic, then we spend more time on our screens because we're not going out, and it's safer to stay in, and all these things. And you're always on your phone. If you're not on your phone, you're on a screen. If you're not on a screen, you're on your phone again. Yeah, literally on the computer. Like it revolves around. Yeah. And then we need to remember that everybody who's speaking something, no one has curated this thing, no publisher, no editor has gone through it, and it's raw, it's good and it's bad. Then there's a lot of authentic stories. Like you read stories, my gosh, I'm so motivated, then I can read about, I don't have to go through so many levels to get to someone who inspires me. I can just go directly to their page and see what they're saying and get inspired. The same way, there's people who need to make money or who do this as a profession, and the people who pay almost inform them what we are getting then. So influencers, which is a good profession, which is the way marketing is going to be for a long time, but then it's we are inspired by their stories, but then there are all these people paying them to sell their things, and then it gets mixed up and the line is so thin, you don't know where the authentic story ends and where the marketing starts.
begins.
Yeah, and I think that calls us, if we are going back to seeing and compassion, calls us to be very awake to then what we see. Because if we are not going out to see things, we're not seeing our neighbors, we are not talking to them, then we are only seeing through our screens, and our screens are being curated by all these millions of people. Then how do we see what is true? How do we see then? How do we go through compassion? How do we start the first level of compassion, which is seeing in a world where we are being guided what to see?
I mean, but then also, even now that you've said that, how do we start by seeing what is true, and just tying it to what Nash is saying, with starting by saying that the truest thing about any person that we see is that they are deserving of love, they have dignity and all of that. And now we know that Twitter and social media is where we go to fight battles that are non-existent, is where we go to derage people, it's where we go to, it's crazy. It's a war zone. It's a war zone of undignifying person after person. It's almost like we are having a battle of how lower can we get? Like, how lower can we get this one? That's so crazy that you'd mention, like, start with what's true. Like, what is true?
Actually see, start with love, like Nash is saying. Start with this is a human being, even on the screen. Oh my gosh, it's a new complex. A new level.
It's a new level. It really is a new level. I don't know if you could speak a bit into that, into the social media world and what that has looked like.
Yeah, I mean, and I reference to this. I mean, of course, quite a dramatic documentary, The Social Dilemma. I mean, let's be honest, it's quite alarmist in that sense. But on the other hand, it does give us a bit of a hint, and I'm almost like we could sort of settle for influencers and I guess they have a profession and all that kind of thing. I mean, where it gets tricky is when now we have this artificial intelligence and all these algorithms curating what they think I need me to keep watching, more centrally, not for me to do anything, but more centrally to just keep glued to my screen. And we figured that there are several ways to keep me doing that. If I'm anxious, if I'm more angry, if I'm engaged on a Twitter battle, whether I'm the one actually doing the tweeting of like cheering my team from a distance, you know the thing. And the thing isn't even being aware that it's just not the people actively doing the whatever they are doing. It's also that there are all these machines behind the thing, and almost this awareness that the longer I am on my screen, the more I am a prime customer product to be sold to some advertiser, and also of course we have all known all the ways with doom scrolling, how we leave that social media world living worse off than when we came into it, So I do think, like someone said, first is to be honest, because we are consuming way too much. The times that Clara was saying when we have TV and we had to wait for news or whatever time. But the thing about it is, like, it's so fascinating. I can be in my house and literally I can leave my laptop watching whatever I was watching. And as I'm going to the bathroom, I'm going with my phone and I'll switch on to a different app and I'll scroll Twitter there, and then I'll come back and I'll put it on the side, and I'll continue with my thing. And it's just like this so fascinating thing where we are consuming way too much, regardless of whatever it, whether it's good or bad. Maybe a check is just to say, wait, slow down. I am becoming a zombie as compared to a more productive person. And so the easiest way to know that is like the more stressed I am, the more I doom scroll. So I'm like, okay, now it's time to get off the thing. So I think for me, therefore, then I'm just sort of trying to see that it's like sort of part of curating what I see is almost reclaiming my own seeing, and just saying, you guys don't get to decide and define what I'm watching and how long I'm going to be watching it. I'm just going to put it there, and I'm just going to go for a walk. I'm going to read a book. I'm going to listen to a podcast, or just change the channels a bit, as it were. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So it's what doom scrolling, spending all this time. I mean, because I was leading there to where. How do you then start to curate your own world that leads you to become? Because what I hear is that there is need for us to reclaim our own seeing, because our own seeing is just that important to fight for. And we also know that it's important because people are investing a lot to make us into a product that can be bought. I don't know, how do you escape? Because it's hard to fight AI. It's like it's so I mean, when I think about it, like, it's science. Like, they know how you're going to feel when you see it. People have been talking about, like, you mentioned, a friend of mine said how she mentioned that she wanted to get a car, and now her Facebook is just full of people selling cars, and she's just like, what? What is happening? How do you reclaim your sense of self, your sense of humanity and dignity, so that you keep moving in the world as a grounded person, so that you notice your neighbors, you notice your own family, you notice what's going on around you, because your seeing is just that important. Yeah. How do you, I don't know, any suggestions, ideas?
Let me say the generic ones, and then Clara will give them more specific one. It's like you to give advice,
Please.
No, honestly, I just, as you're talking about, I like that we talk about the social media world, right? Because I think then it wakes us up to an awareness that there are multiple worlds going on, And I think that one of the easier ways, obviously, like, escaping it all is not going to be enough, right? I think is making room for the competing worlds to find a space in it. So like I said, if I find myself, spending too much time on whatever media platform, I'm like, wait, I need to break. And for me, honestly, when I say break, literally means turn down the computer, go for a walk. Like, it's not even enough for me to sit on the same spot and say, I got this, So sort of like breaking this cycle to say, well, that world has had enough of me, I'm going out. Another very tangible thing for me, at least to sort of curate my social media world, is it sort of reduce increasingly the number of people that I'm watching or following. And I know there's also a dynamic in that, because then I end up creating my social media bubble where I'm just reinforcing, Trevor Noah and Trevor Noah's view and Trevor Noah's view, and but I mean, honestly, for me, I'm like, I can't just keep letting everything come. So I increasingly say I watch this through people on a daily basis, and then I move on. And then I think I was going to say that thing for me, at least, that I'm working to do quite hard, is by determining when I actually do my social media world. When do I actually visit that world, Because I find it cramming whatever small me time I have, Like me and my phone, I'm on a supermarket line, it's crap. I'm like, literally, we all know what we do. I am in a matatu, it's like I sit down and like, the thing. And it's fascinating when that happens so subconsciously. Like, I don't even realize that this thing is cramming every single space for me to be creative or to think thoughts outside or to even notice my neighbor beyond this. So then I tell myself, I watch, these 2 3 clips of YouTube whenever this time, and I check online this time and this time. I wish I could tell you that that's very successful, but on my healthy days, I actually stick to that, because it's a way of being informed, but it's also still a world that needs sort of tending to, yeah, I wish I could just say I'm like the high priest for like I quit all the social medias. I don't know. So anyway, there goes some of my starting thoughts.
So it's I have for you. It's you are reclaiming it by like you get a bit of control between the two worlds, because then you can't shut it down. Now you're a pastor online, as it turns out. You're a
Literally, I need people to watch me online. It's like even as I did the online world.
Yeah. What about you, Clara?
I'm just wondering how we, including myself, can learn to see, because it looks like learning a new, we need to learn again how to see, because and I like the framing that Nash has given. There's the social world, social media world, and then there is the other world. We live in this other world, but then the social media world is also not 100% bad. It helps us connect with, like I was saying, with people that matter. And now that you're not able even to visit people, then like WhatsApp is my main way of connecting to the people that are close to me and but that are far. But I practically, like, how can you calculate or how can you track how many hours you're on your phone? For example, if you can, there's a thing on my phone that gives me the hours per day at the end of the week, and I cringe every time. I'm like, what? Your hours are up 28% to 4 hours a day. I'm like, no way. Like,
it's Chimamanda who was saying she's been doing this calling people to reading. This campaign for calling people to reading, and she was like, now we know that it's not that you don't have time to read, because how much time do you spend on your phone?
But it's so crazy. I mean, there are apps to help you manage your time on the phone. There's an app called Forest, which I used to use and stop, but then it grows trees. And if you take your phone, the trees disappear. Anyway, but apart from that, I think it's putting for yourself goals outside the phone and outside the computer. So instead of another Netflix, what does probably actually knowing your neighbor look like? If that's okay in your setting. or going for a walk, or calling someone who lives around you and going for a walk together, and not going for a run this time with earphones and something, but then going for a run without anything, just and enjoy the here and now. Not because you go for a run, but then you have music or a podcast and you're in that other world, but you're running here, and it's just practicing being present or being here now as much as possible. So it's going to the office and being there with the people there. I'm not saying these are not my people. It's me. I have my people for weekends, and like they're just bits and pieces of yourself everywhere, but never people don't experience a full you, whatever that means. Yeah, so that for me is just calling myself to compassion. I mean, seeing is it's easy to ignore. You can pass. No one else will know. It's just you.
I'm the only one who's seen. So even if I don't do anything about it, it's okay.
Yeah, but then it's also being truthful. I'm looking for there's another word, integrity. And just saying, I actually feel like I want to pursue that conversation, or with this person I felt this, and just confirming with them, or if that's okay, with wisdom, and following where it goes.
Yeah. Thank you guys for sharing all of that. It's a lot of information, obviously, and I think compassion is just that kind of topic. And because we've started with having the courage to see, I think that's a good place to start, and a good place to end that conversation. But I will just add this, that again, what you see affects how you feel, and it influences how you act. And these conversations are about moving us not just to believe certain things, but also to practice certain things. And we are being called to more. I think we are being called to more. We are being called to lead. I don't know, to be salt and light, which is our Christian call. Then how then do we become those people? How do I cultivate, the courage to see within myself, to see people, to see suffering, to see even joy and be present in it, to see different kinds of things that are calling out to me and respond and be like, okay, yes. This is something I want to be a part of, or this is something I'd like to contribute to, or no, not that one, not that one. That's not for me. And seeing is just so important. I don't know. It's just that important. Please.
It is that important.
It's just
all
that
time.
important what we see and how we experience that. And so, yeah, thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Clara and Nash. Obviously, this has been so cool. Next week, we are going to continue with the conversation on compassion and more calls to courage from Pastor Nash, I think. Yes. Yes.
And wisdom.
More calls to courage. Thank you for joining us. This has been Village Chats. I've been your host, Agnes Olo. I will see you next week.